So let me just share my screen. Has everyone got that? I'll assume so. I always forget that people are on mute. So yeah, my name is Mark Armstrong. I'm here with Ray Bell. We both work for inTec. So inTec, we're essentially a technology consultancy. So what we look to do is help businesses improve what they do through technology. The purpose of this really was to try and give you some tips that'll help kind of refine your setup or adjust the effects of what all this extra screen time might be doing for you. So we're not just going to look at it from a pure technology perspective, but also look at it from just a well-being perspective as well. Now, obviously, everyone's been doing this for a number of weeks now, so we'll try and avoid sort of teaching anyone how to suck eggs. But hopefully, there'll be sort of snippets in here that you'll find useful. Everyone's got a different home environment. Everyone's got different systems and different demands on their roles. So it's going to be fairly kind of generic, I guess, our advice to a certain extent, but we absolutely welcome questions. So if you do have any sort of questions around what we're asking, what we're telling you about, or you want us to elaborate on anything, please don't hesitate to let us know. As I say, a brief intro into us. So we help organizations improve through technology. So that might be through telecoms, it might be through business applications, cloud, technology strategy. The purpose of our organization was really we identified a need within the industry for a lot of companies that didn't necessarily have a dedicated IT function or had a smallish IT function. Kind of, were they making the best use of what they had? And a lot of the time it wasn't the case. A lot of the time for a lot of businesses, it was kind of IT was there because it was necessary. People needed to send email, they needed to access files and all the rest of it, but they weren't necessarily using technology to its fullest. So what we do is we'll work with businesses, look at what their processes are, look at what they do as an organization, and then say, well, have you considered this? What about doing this? Did you know that if you change this little thing, it's going to save you 10, 15, 20 minutes every single day? And that's kind of our bread and butter. So there's 5 kind of areas that we wanted to look at in relation to our technology tips. And the first one was around connectivity. So probably the most important thing for everybody at the moment is making sure that they've got a very good internet connection. So there's a few things that you can do to ensure that you're getting the best possible connectivity. The first is just to make sure that you're on a decent connection to start with. It's amazing that I still talk to people who have still got broadband when they could be on fibre. Now, I was in the unenviable position until I moved in January of being on a street where I couldn't get fibre. But if that's not the case, then I think absolutely the first thing anybody needs to be looking at is to ensure that they've got a fibre connection. If they haven't got it, get one. There's lots of very competitive deals out there now, so I absolutely recommend that you look at various comparison websites. My personal favourite, I always just go to Quidco, which is a kind of a cashback website that pays you to go with certain providers. I go look at whoever's given the best amount of money, and that's the one I generally take. But absolutely look into getting fibre. The deals now are such that they're the same price as a low-speed broadband connection. One of the best ones out there at the moment, Vodafone are doing, I think, up to 65 meg fibre for £23 a month. So it's very cost-effective and really a much better solution than using sort of standard broadband. If you live in an area where you just can't get fibre, then the other thing I absolutely would consider looking at is mobile broadband. So a lot of the mobile providers are now providing home solutions for people who can't get a high-speed connection. And again, they are coming down in price a lot. They used to be super expensive because you wouldn't necessarily want to be on a capped solution, so only have a limited amount of data that you can download, because if you're using things for video conferencing or Netflix and all that sort of thing, it can use a lot of data very, very quickly. Again, deal wise, best one probably out there at the moment is 3. So with 3 you can get an unlimited data SIM on 4G or 5G if you live in an area that's got it, with the router for £25 a month on a 12-month contract. And the joy of any sort of mobile SIM card, a mobile deal, is that there's no setup. You literally just, they'll send it the next day, you plug it in, and off you go. And I've used those solutions in the past. They're very good, and a great alternative if you either want flexibility because you can have them on a month-by-month rolling contract, but also just if you can't get a robust connection where you are, but you still have a reasonable internet connection, phone connection, then that can be a good alternative. The next thing to look at is where you put the router. So people just tend to just plug it in wherever and not think about it. But there's more to it than that. The first thing you need to do is to ensure that you're plugging it into, as much as possible, into the main line that comes into your house. So most houses will have several phone line points in them. But the main one is the one that looks like this. It's got kind of a line across it. It splits. That is the one that's coming into the house. So you'll always get, it might not be by a dramatic amount, but you'll always get the fastest connection if you use that particular box as opposed to one of the other ones. One of the things that slows any internet speed down is how far away you are from the exchange and how much copper wire it takes to take your internet connection to your router. So anything that you can do to minimize that helps, and this is one way you can do that. The other consideration when it comes to where you put the router is obviously where you work. So you want to have that router as centrally as possible so that the Wi-Fi that it's kind of spitting out across the house can stretch as far as possible. We'll come back to Wi-Fi in a second. But you want it somewhere where you're going to get a strong signal in the places that you're going to be using the internet the most. Also, one thing I would absolutely consider, especially now that we're kind of so tethered to our home internet, is the quality of the router that you've got. The ones that you generally get off, well, I say generally, pretty much exclusively what you get from internet providers aren't particularly great. So again, if it were me, if I was absolutely reliant on the internet to work, then I wouldn't necessarily want to stick with what I'd got for free from my provider. It's absolutely worth looking into getting a more robust router. You'll get much better Wi-Fi speeds, much better connectivity speeds, and just a better overall experience. Check what speed you get as well. So a lot of the fiber providers now have a minimum speed guarantee, but it's worth checking to make sure that you're getting that. So I regularly use speedtest.net, but there's various others out there, just to check the level of speed that I'm getting and make sure it's A, what I'm paying for, and B, good enough for whatever I need to be doing. So part of my routine when I'm going to join a video conference, for example, is I'll just check these things just to make sure that before I join, I kind of know where the land lies and I know that everything's going to sort of work as it needs to. Another thing that will absolutely improve the speed of your connection is Ethernet. So as much as possible, I absolutely recommend to use a wired connection whenever you can. Now, the easiest way to use a wired connection is obviously to be using a computer that's near the router. Then you can just take a wire from the router and put that straight into the PC or laptop. But that's not always possible. But there are ways in which you can extend Ethernet. One way is to drill a load of holes in your house and drag cable through, but that's a pain. The other way is to use what we call power line adapters. And what these do is basically use the electrical system in your house, the electrical circuits in your house, electrical cable wiring, to put a data connection through. So you could plug one of these in next to your router, plug the cable in, and then have as many of these extra points as you want all across the house where a cable then comes out and then goes into your device. And then that's going to then make more of your devices wired, so Ethernet connected as opposed to wireless, and therefore give you a more solid connection. Test Wi-Fi. So I mentioned before, where you put your router is important, predominantly because of the Wi-Fi connection. So it's absolutely worth making sure that you've got no sort of black spots within the house where the connection isn't great. One of the things that you can use to test your Wi-Fi is an app that you can get on your phone called Netgear Wi-Fi Analytics. It's free, and basically you can start that up and walk around the house and it'll tell you what signal it's getting from anywhere. So again, that can be really useful. If your Wi-Fi connection isn't great, then there's multiple ways that you can fix that. You can get a new router that that gives a better Wi-Fi coverage. So again, the ones that you tend to get free from providers aren't amazing. So it's worth looking at that. You can get access points which will extend the Wi-Fi, so they'll take the signal from the router and amplify it essentially, and where in the location that you place the access point. Something newer that we're seeing a lot of people now take up is what we call mesh, which is another kind of access point, but better than the Wi-Fi extenders that we used to see. And it provides a much more robust Wi-Fi connection. So there's lots of mesh providers out there. It's a more expensive solution, but if you want whole house coverage that's reliable, it can be a really good option. I personally have that. I use a Google Nest Wi-Fi, but there's multiple out there. The last thing to consider is what happens when your line goes down. So again, we're so reliant on these things now. What happens if your connection goes down? So absolutely, I would think about that. The easiest thing to do is to use mobile. So personally, if my internet goes down, I just tether off my handset. So your phone, everyone who's got a smartphone has got a little mobile router in their pocket. So you can tether your handset to multiple devices at once if you need to, and use its internet connection to stay connected. Just be aware of data limits. So if you're using that for any sustained period of time, you're going to know about it in your bill unless you've got unlimited data. But absolutely make sure that you've got a secondary solution. You can also buy little MiFi points that are kind of dedicated routers for mobile. That again, you might want to consider if connectivity is absolutely key. So that is connectivity. The next thing we're going to look at, so I'm going to pass over to Ray now, is home office setup.
Okay, so thank you, Mark. So just continuing this theme really of kind of location and setup. Part of it might be dictated to by sort of router and cabling, but in reality there's a big decision, or a decision to be made around what's the most comfortable location in the house or the best place to work from. So whether it's, and it may not be that everyone's got the same setup, but it's certainly the case that some people may have an office at home, some people might be using a spare room, some might be using the kitchen table, and there's all sorts of different combinations. So appreciate that everyone's environment's different. The picture in the bottom left has been doing the rounds on the internet, so I'm not sure that's the standard approved method of utilizing an ironing board. It does meet the criteria of an adjustable height workstation, I would say. However, it's probably not the most stable platform to be working from regularly. What we would say is it really comes down to a number of different choices. Location, first of all, it's ideal to pick a location in the house that fits with that home life as well. The more central location, the more busier location, the harder it is obviously for video calls, etc., and disruption in the sort of home life as well. So ideally a sort of a quieter, separate location, but I appreciate not everyone's got that choice. The second point's really just as applicable for the home office as it is for your normal working office environment, is making sure you've got a comfortable sort of chair and desk setup. This is really about making sure you're comfortable in that seating position. We do know obviously that as more time has now been spent on video calls, ultimately it's more screen time, it's more time sat in the same position, and comfort is really, really important. And ultimately there's lots of really useful resources around the ideal kind of desk setup. There's really an ergonomics point. The two things I would highlight in terms of how you set up your equipment and your desk are, ideally you want the monitor to be roughly an arm's length away, so you're not too close to your screen in that regard, but not far away that it's straining. And obviously it does depend on monitor size, but that's a rough guide. And the second thing is the top of the monitor should be at eye level, which really ensures that you get that straight back position on the chair and not getting that hunched over in that crouched position. So there's lots and lots of advice on both both ergonomics and ultimately how you remain comfortable working in terms of exercise, stretching, avoiding too much strain on the eyes, etc. Lots and lots of online resource, which differs. I put a little diagram in this slide deck that just shows some of it. It's probably very hard to read on the size of the screen, but we can obviously issue the deck afterwards. And then there's also a consideration on lighting. Screen glare can be a problem if the lighting is coming from over your shoulder or from behind. Obviously, the sun moves during the day. It can be useful to sort of face a window, but equally then if that sun's coming across, you might need blinds on it. So it's just thinking about the position of the screen so that obviously you're not in shadow for a call, but equally you're not being blinded by the sun and you're not having the screen glare at the same time. So a couple of examples, if Mark just move it on one, in terms of desk setups, these are just sort of random images for desk setups. You'll notice that particularly with the laptops, you can get a little stand or something. I've even seen people using it on books or stacking them up just to get a bit of height. So if you have got a docking station or a USB keyboard or a mouse separate, then get that laptop screen elevated if you can, to get it up to eye level. If you've got an additional monitor with a docking station, that's ideal. Plug the laptop into, and then obviously the monitor can be positioned, the keyboard can be positioned, and the mouse can be positioned in the most comfortable way. The picture on the top right, again, that's facing a window, so there's good natural light in it. The person will be lit up when they're having a video call. Hopefully they're not facing direct sunlight, otherwise they need to use some blinds or change position. So just some general hints on the setup. But like I say, there's lots of really useful online resource, but there's a couple of key points around the position of the screen. And I will come back to the last point we'll finish on is more about sort of more of the health and well-being and making sure that we manage the impact of screen time. Now that we've got connected, we've got a comfortable environment, we're probably going to talk a little bit now about the different business applications or the different sort of tools we can use to actually work from home. So on that note, I will hand back to Mark. He'll talk about those.
Thanks, Ray. So yeah, point 3 is collaboration from home, and how do we do it? So we've all been in this situation for what, 7 weeks now. So hopefully we've got a bit of a handle on this. But we wanted to look at a few points really as to how we are collaborating and just making sure that we're doing it as best we can. So the first question that I put up there is, where are your files? I'm sure everybody knows where their files are, but are those files necessarily stored in the place that they should be? And are you finding that accessing them is easy or not? We've worked with lots of businesses over the last 6 weeks that had a huge panic because they realized that actually working from home was nigh on impossible with the current setup that they've got. They had unreliable VPN connections, so people couldn't necessarily access files very easily from home. People weren't set up to access them from home. So it's absolutely a consideration, I think, for any businesses that continue to store files on networks locally within the business. The cloud is something that should absolutely be a major consideration for them. There's no doubt that what we've seen over the last 6 weeks is that companies that had already made that transition and moved their files into a cloud environment, so into an environment where all the files are on the web essentially, found it far easier to transition their staff into home working because there was essentially no setup to be done. If your files live in the cloud, they're accessible anywhere. So people could just log in on any computer they want, i.e. just a home PC, they didn't necessarily have their work-specific computer, and access everything and work as they would have done throughout the office. So absolutely, for anyone on this call that hasn't looked at the cloud as an option, I absolutely implore you to do so. It's hugely cost-effective. It's a cheaper way of storing files than on servers generally, and it gives you lots of extra features. So, for example, by storing files in the cloud, not only can I access them anywhere, I can access them on anything with an internet connection. So I can work off a phone or a tablet, as well as off a laptop or a PC or a Mac. I can collaborate with people much more easily. So one of the benefits of having files in the cloud is that multiple people can work on the same file simultaneously. So what you don't have is a situation of the past where people are sort of emailing files around to one another and editing them and then sending them on and so on, where you end up with 5, 6, 7 versions of the same file because different people have worked on it at different times. If I'm working out of the cloud, I send a link to the file to whoever I want, and they access that link. Now, they're not accessing a version of the file, they're accessing the actual file. So when they edit it, I will see those edits. If I'm in the file at the same time, which I could be, I'll see those edits happening in real time. So as a productivity tool, it's also fantastic. Whether I'm working from home or not, the ability for me to work alongside any number of colleagues at once on the same thing is a huge time saver. Now, the other consideration with regards where your files are is if you're in a situation where you just store them on a laptop, you absolutely need to get that changed because there is no backup to that. So if anybody does continue just to save everything on their laptop or onto their computer, and that is it, you absolutely need to think about, well, what happens if my computer gives up the ghost? And in reality, there's still far too many people out there who have just all their files on a computer. If that computer goes, they lose everything. So for anybody who does that, one of the easiest and cheapest ways that you can move that away and back that up is to set up a cloud account. So if you use Windows, you can use OneDrive. If you don't have a business account, sort of Office 365 or something like that, then you can still use OneDrive Personal, which will give you 5 gigabytes of data storage for free. Or you could use Google Drive or any number of other solutions. But there's lots of free solutions out there that will allow you to back up all of your data and put it into the cloud, so that therefore it's accessible anywhere, and more importantly, it's backed up. When it comes to keeping in touch with colleagues and clients, I think the first thing to note is that to make sure that that's continuing to happen. I think we're seeing a real move away from email as being the primary communication tool in business. It's not quite there yet, but it's a gradual process, but it's absolutely moving forward. And moving into these more dedicated collaboration suites. So we'll look at these in a little bit more detail further on in this deck, but whether that be Teams, whether that be Slack, whether that be the likes of Zoom or WebEx for video conferencing, I think it's absolutely important that we're looking at these more free-form methods of communication to keep in touch with one another, as opposed to email, which tends to be more formal and a little bit clunky. People tend not to use email in their personal lives anymore. They tend to use WhatsApp or text messaging or Facebook Messenger, and there's a reason for that. So it's absolutely worth looking at as a business to look at these consumer models and why they've developed as they have, and looking to then implement them within a business environment. I think with regards to keeping a sense of team, I think it's absolutely important to schedule regular team meetings and try and do that via video. It's always, I think it should be a rule these days that you should have to have your video switched on all the time as well, and not sort of duck out of it. But I think the benefit of having these video calls with colleagues is dramatic. I think it does absolutely give us a connection that you just don't get if this was just a pure audio call. So I think to regularly schedule those, weekly or however it needs to be, to keep everyone in the loop and keep everyone talking to each other, I think is really important. And doesn't necessarily have to be formal either. We might be sort of up to our eyes a bit with quizzes, but nevertheless, those sorts of activities within a business environment can be really useful, just to continue that sort of camaraderie and keep people sort of close to each other, rather than everyone sort of being a separate island at home, working independently. And all these various sort of video conferencing solutions will allow you to have that level of connection with one another. And if we look at that, then so that sort of segues nicely into how we improve the video conferencing experience. I have a call with my my parents-in-law every day at 6 o'clock, and every day at 5 to 6, I'll normally get a message saying that they can't log on, or something's broke, or it's not quite working. And every day they'll log on and they'll be on mute, or the video won't work, or there's always something. So I think the first thing to do is to make sure when you're about to join a video call that everything is working as it needs to. The first way to do that is to make sure that you've got decent equipment. There's nothing worse than being on a call with people who've got a really shotgun microphone, or that have lots of background noise, or the video quality is terrible. Now, obviously, the video quality is determined a lot by people's internet connection, but as well as that, it's just determined by the actual the kit that they're using. So I absolutely recommend that you get a good quality webcam. A lot of people have them built into their laptops now, which is great. But if your laptop's a good few years old, then it might not necessarily be the best. So I'd absolutely look at investing in a HD camera, so 1080p. Look for a decent brand. There's lots of brands out there. I had a cursory glance at Amazon before today, and there was a million brands that I'd never heard of that were selling really cheap webcams. But I think there's a reason why they're cheap. So I definitely look at probably spending upwards of £75. You could spend thousands if you wanted. And look at the brands that have built up a name in this area. So Logitech, Microsoft, Jabra, Polycom, all really good brands to look at, and with lots of various bits of functionality depending on what you want. So the camera I've got at the moment will follow me around the room, and it's got a very wide lens. Might not necessarily need that sort of stuff, everything, all these extras you pay for. But I think having, say, a microphone built into it, I find that really useful, so I don't necessarily have to go and scramble for a headset every time someone calls me. I can just press answer and just talk at the screen. I find that a much more natural way of doing it. Again, if you've got this on a laptop, you've already got all this stuff. But if your laptop is 3, 4, 5 years old, it might be worth investing in a dedicated solution to give yourself that better experience. One thing I would mention is, as you might imagine, stock on all this sort of stuff at the moment is pretty limited, but you can still find it. The other thing is a headset. So if you're spending a lot of time on calls and you are in a noisy environment or in an echoey environment, a lot of people at the moment are working out of kitchens and places like that have got lots of hard walls and hard surfaces, so you get a lot of echo. So in that instance, the headset is even more important with a noise cancelling mic, again, just to make sure that the experience is as it needs to. That could just be, the headphones that you've got with your smartphone, or you could invest in a dedicated solution. Loads of ones out there from Apple, Google, Samsung, Jabra, whether it be Bluetooth or wired, but absolutely worth looking at something like that, especially if you're working in an environment that's maybe not conducive to the sort of thing that I'm doing now, where I'm not using a headset and just talking at my microphone. If you're in a place that's particularly echoey, that can be distracting. So again, headsets will mitigate that. And pick a solution that works for you. So we put out a platform comparison a few weeks ago on LinkedIn that got really good traction, comparing to be fair, there's a million various solutions out there at the moment for video conferencing, but we picked 4 of the most popular ones at the moment. So Slack, Microsoft Teams, Zoom, and WebEx. I think I won't distill, you'll get a copy of this deck, so you'll be able to sort of read our notes, but in summary, what we tended to find was that the top 2 for general day-to-day use are probably Microsoft Teams and Zoom. And the considerations that you've got is Teams is free, but you get the full suite of solutions for free, as long as you've got an Office 365 subscription, which most people do. And Teams is much more than video conferencing. So Teams allows file storage. So when we talked before around where your files are, well, Teams can store all your files, and it can allow for a lot of collaboration. But if you're just using this for meetings, the one thing that Teams does have against it is that it can be a little bit harder to implement. And one of the reasons that Zoom has become super popular is that it's very, very easy to set up and start using. Again, you can use Zoom for free and you get unlimited one-to-one meetings, or you can have up to 100 people in a meeting, but they're limited to 40 minutes. Now that limit has not been removed, but there is kind of a lottery at the moment where you can find that call will be extended to unlimited for free, but it's absolutely not guaranteed. So I've had some sessions on Zoom where it's lasted for 2 or 3 hours and I've had to restart it every 40 minutes. I've had others that it immediately just gives me the free upgrade, but that can be absolutely a limiting factor. Zoom limit the quality of the feed, video feed that you can get if you're on a non-paid subscription, and Zoom doesn't really do anything other than video conferencing. So if you're wanting to do anything else, i.e. collaboration outside of video, then Zoom isn't necessarily the best solution. Also, if you're looking at the paid subscriptions, then the cheapest paid subscription on Zoom costs more than an Office 365 subscription with full access to Word and Excel and email and all the rest of it, and with Teams as a part of that. So I don't think it's necessarily a cost effective. The other thing that's a big thing around Zoom at the moment is the security aspect. I know that a lot of schools and a lot of sort of public sector organizations have been banned from using Zoom because of the security concerns. I don't think it's as dramatic as all that, and Zoom have been working super hard over the last few weeks to improve the security aspects. I think it's been a real sort of a negative aspect of it. So I wouldn't necessarily worry too much around that. But I think it's just all around what you need it for. If you just need pure video conferencing and nothing more, I think Zoom can be a really good solution. But if it were me and I was starting to then get a paid subscription for Zoom, then I would probably move away from it and look at something that'll do a little bit more for my money, like Microsoft Teams. And now we'll move back to Ray.
Okay, thanks, Mark. So I would just add a couple of things to what Mark's talked about in terms of applications. So we've looked at collaboration tools there, but we also appreciate that every organisation's got its own set of business applications, whether it's file servers with VPNs or hosted desktops or cloud applications. So and obviously we could run a session on its own just on business apps. So what I would offer is that if anyone has got any kind of more specific business systems that they want to talk about, we can absolutely follow that up afterwards, because that'll be very unique and bespoke to your business and your organization. So but yeah, absolutely, the collaboration tools are generic and applicable to all, and as I say, we can have one-to-one conversations on your bespoke environments if necessary. So just in terms of the finish point, really, so you know, Mark's touched on a couple of these kind of health and well-being points. You know, that avoiding isolation by keeping in touch with people's really important. You know, video is great as a you know, it's not as good as face-to-face, but certainly it's the best second option. But we're also, you know, we're technologists, but we also recognise some of the risks and challenges with using video all the time. It starts to, you know, already taking over our lives and making us work in a very different way. And it's always worth just thinking about how do we manage that. Working from home in itself is a very different challenge to go into the office, and we've just got a few thoughts here on how we kind of best, I guess, understand the impact of this extra screen time in a working from home environment. So in terms of the sort of suggestions or ideas, it's quite commonly sort of discussed now about having a routine when you're working from home, and what we really boil that down into is, you know, having something that starts the day and having something that ends the day. That's the first thing. So it's always good to have the working day has started and it has ended, and that routine, you can also include things like your breaks, etc., which will help with that extra screen time. But it also can adjust to fit with home life, and everyone's role is different. But we were having conversation before the call about, you know, how the working day seems to be very different when you're working from home compared to the usual 9 to 5. And different roles will allow different things, and also home life might be different. Some people may prefer to, you know, have tea, spend some time with younger children in the early evening, and then do some work afterwards. And if that fits with your role, then that's great. Others might fit more of a standard working hour. And even when we return out of this lockdown period, it's expected that sort of flexible working and flexible working hours and staggered travel time will feature as well. So that's even more important. So really the routine is important, but also making sure that it fits with that home life and that home setup and that home environment, and obviously the role. We've touched on the point about having a break a couple of times, but because of that extra screen time, you know, getting stretches, exercising your elbows, exercising, getting your eyes readjusted to different things, and also just having that time away from video calls, which are quite intense. You know, it takes an extra level of concentration having a video call, and can be mentally more draining and more tiring. So having those breaks and those sort of opportunities to get away from the screen are always good. And the final point really is around the fact that video calls, they are convenient. And again, before the call, we were having a chat with Vince saying, you know, it's just so easy now to book in a video call. You don't have to arrange travel. You're not trying to get 4 or 5 people organised into the same place. If there's an hour in the diary free tomorrow, it can be filled with a video call really, really easily. And habitually, I think we tend to book meetings at the earliest available point as opposed to the most appropriate time for a meeting. And what that results in is effectively having a day, or could have a day, just full of video calls, which obviously has got that extra strain and impact on that screen time. But also fundamentally, it doesn't really give you any time to follow up on the actions from those meetings. So if you have an entire day of video calls, where's the time to actually deal with the output of those calls and those meetings to make them worthwhile time? So I think the general advice here on this point is, as well as having that structure to the day if possible, but use the diary time. So build time into the diary so that you don't end up having 4 video calls where you would have had 2 face-to-face meetings. You have perhaps the 2 calls, the 3 calls, whatever you're comfortable with, and build an hour in after that call to have that wrap up, to have that follow up time, to send the emails, to do the actions, or just to catch up on general admin. So build your admin and your follow up and action times into the diary, and you can also at the same time build in your breaks and your structure and your routine into that. So and it's not always possible to stick to a structure every day. We appreciate that, but it's a starter for 10 to really to try and help structure and make sure that you're not overloading the day with what. So that's kind of the end of the session